All right, welcome back in. It is Ermanni and Edwards, except it isn't. Matt Shepard, Sean Baligian with you. One of the cool things we get to do is talk to a guy. And listen, Shep, you and I were just going over, like the two wily veterans we are, going over our battle scars and what the Lions have done to us. Our next guest knows a little something about that. He has some scars. And conversely, I think he's had a smile on his face probably the last 3.5 days as well, because I'll tell you what, when you have what we saw transpire on the 24th, it's pretty hard to keep that smile off your face. Look, he's trying to hide it right now. Did you say? Look at Miller trying to. There it is.
I'm smiling.
There's the smile.
Just for old time's sake, guys, I brought myself to the old padded room where I used to bring me when things weren't going well. So we still have it here in Allen Park. Yeah. So I'm still in the padded room. Good to see you guys.
Yeah. Nice to see you, Dan.
You deserve it, Dan.
Hope you and the family had a wonderful Christmas, my friend.
We did. And Shep, to your point, thank you. But, man, I tell you, it is – and you guys know this from being around teams, the best part of doing what we do is seeing fans happy. And, you know, I've had a lot of people say to me that I deserve this, and I appreciate that. I mean, but, man, it's these fans that have just dealt with, you know, decades upon decades of gut punches and being disappointed and not being able to celebrate something like this. And there's a balance here between, you know, this is just a step along the way to where you ultimately want to go. Mm-hmm. But you can't lose sight of the fact that it is an important step and something that they had to do, and just a mile marker of you know, success that this group has been able to attain. And it's an important moment. And I've had so many people, you know, reach out to me and tell me that, you know, their grandfathers were crying, or their fathers called them, or people called them from wherever they were and just shared this moment. So it's definitely really cool, but it's also one of those moments you say, okay, now you're on to other things because you got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, it brings people together, there's for sure. What has this team done better than maybe you expected when you first watched them at the beginning of the year?
You know, I knew this offense, Shep, was going to be good. The question was, how good was it going to be? And I was looking at some of the numbers last night, man. Over the last 8 weeks, they've averaged 160 yards rushing per game, which, wow, man, that's we haven't seen that around here since the 90s when Barry was here. And there were years where we were seeing the Lions, you know, barely get to 85 yards a game rushing. They just never, under Stafford, could they get a rushing attack, and never did they give him that kind of balance that they've got now. So this offensive line has been everything is advertised, and seeing the way they've run the ball. Because, man, in this league, that's just flexing. And I just got done doing something with Ben Johnson. I asked him, when you're running the ball like that, how does it change your job? And he just said, you know, paraphrasing, but he's just like, it changes everything. So I think the consistent running game, not knowing with those two running backs coming in exactly how that would go, we knew who Montgomery was, but has just given them so much. And then, yeah, I think the questions are still, you know, on the defensive side of the ball. And I think that those were questions we had coming into the year. And frankly, outside of the job they've done against the run, which has been really good, you still have some concerns about this defense against the pass.
Dan Miller, of course, the voice of the Lions, Fox 2 sports director, host of Game Day Live, kindly joining us here on Woodward Sports. Dan, I want to stay with the running backs for a moment because I saw your tweet last night, and Shep brought up the point about draft day and Jahmyr Gibbs. There were people that were literally pulling hair out of their head. And one of these days, very soon, I'm going to have an official Brad Holmes Appreciation Day. I really am, because let's face it, there were a lot of people that didn't like both of those decisions. If we're being honest right now, looking back, I'm not calling anybody out. If anything, I am just accentuating the point that Brad Holmes went out and saw David Montgomery is going to be an upgrade. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be an upgrade. And both of those moves, while chastised at the time, have worked out wonderfully.
Yeah, I think that Jamal letting him go, that was more emotional than anything else for people because of what he had done in the year that he had. I think if anybody was being honest with themselves, Montgomery's a better player. I mean, and has been in the NFL. You can't take away from what Jamal did. But Montgomery is just, man, his ability to make guys miss and his consistency and doing it in Chicago, at times behind a patchwork offensive line. The thought of him playing here with this offensive line was exciting. Gibbs, you're right, man. I mean, look, there were people who got personal on draft night. I mean, you can go back and look at some of those tweets or X's or whatever you call them, and people were like, does Brad Holmes know how this works? Does Brad Holmes know what he's doing? And I mean, these were people that are in the media in the NFL, and I'm not here to take a victory lap for Brad or anything like that. He does his job, but it's, guys, I'll be honest with you. It is, and look, probably I'm guilty of it too, but it's probably one of the most difficult events because everybody's an expert on draft night.
Oh,
it
right.
is just like everybody is
right.
an expert and knows all about these players. And you know what? It's one of the things that makes it great because everybody feels like they can be. But man, it's sometimes a hard 3 days to get through because some of the final opinions that people drop out there, and there's just no arguing that there's any leeway between what they think and what might be the reality.
Yeah, that's so true. Like they want to use the fourth round on the guard from Iowa State. They've never seen him play. There are always watershed moments, right, for broadcasters when you think or you look at Lomas and TJ and you say, you know what? I'll be damned. This team's pretty good. What was that watershed moment for you during this season?
Ooh, good question. You know what? I mean, I think, Matt, right off the bat, going to Kansas City and winning. I mean, we thought this team, look, they finished 8-2 last year, but you really had to come out and prove yourself again. That didn't earn you anything. And to go to Kansas City and look, I know they didn't have a couple of guys, and that does matter, but to go there and win on that night when they were raising the banner and that place was nuts to celebrate a Super Bowl championship was, to me, eye-opening. And then the way that they've bounced back every step along the way this year, I mean, it's kind of an amazing thing, guys. In the 8-2 last year and 11-4 this year, they haven't lost 2 games in a row since October 30th of last year. I mean, that's incredible in this league to not have 2 losses, stack on top of one another and not, let anything snowball, to always find a way to bounce back. And I credit, Dan Campbell for that, for the way that he set the tone. But to your question, look, I really think that was a moment for this team, for this coaching staff, for everybody to say, okay, here we go. We're picking up where we left off last year. Now, granted, they came back and lost to Seattle, but they figured things out. And I'll be honest with you, the last 2 weeks as well, a hot Denver team coming in here, having won 6 out of 7. And then this past week, going to Minnesota, where, look, I know they've had their injury issues and they got worse during the game, but that's not an easy place to win. You needed to take the drama out of the NFC North and to go there and just put it to rest and be done with it and knock off the team that was, holding the division crown. I think that showed me something as well. So I think everything kind of tells a story and helps you understand things, but there's certainly been things along the way.
You know what's interesting about that, though, guys? He brought up Kansas City, and a lot of people talked about the Chris Jones and Travis Kelce fair, and Dan said that. How come nobody says that when the Lions are missing Frank Ragnow?
Right.
Or St. Brown?
It's amazing how that works out.
Whatever. We always use the other team's crutch to disregard our team, but you don't use it the other way around. Sometimes that frustrates me.
Yeah. Dan, I know you want to get back to Canada and Latvia. I know you're all about watching the World Juniors. He's hockey elite. Don't let anybody fool you. You know what, Dan? The word culture has there's too much of it, okay? But when you're talking about the culture change with the Detroit Lions the last few years, quite frankly, I don't think you can say enough of it. We've all been around this team on days in November where you're walking out of the stadium and everybody, players and media alike, are going, we got another month and a half of this, complete with the 1,000-yard stare. How do you even put into words how this culture has changed over the past couple of years?
Sean, that's a great question. And here's what I would say to you is, I've probably used that word, I don't know how many times in my, 40 some odd years in this business, but I think it becomes apparent when you see it and you understand it when it's right in front of you. And I think there's probably been times where I used that word and now I look back on it and I'm like, I probably didn't use it correctly. But I'll go killer on you. Here's the deal. You have at the top of this organization, Sheila Ham. And when she moved on from Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, She could have just gone out and said, okay, here's a good general manager and here's a good head coach. And people wouldn't have blinked. They would have said, okay, good job. And she would have hired somebody. But she did it differently than that. She did a deep dive into this organization and found out that it was broken and it was fractured and people here weren't happy. And the previous regime had left a lot of people on the outside thinking that they didn't matter because, frankly, that's the way they were treated. And she brought in Chris Spielman, and along with Mike Disner and Rod Wood, that group got together and decided what this organization was going to look like, what values they wanted to have, and just who they wanted to be top down. And I mean Sheila to whatever you consider the lowest rung of the ladder here in this building. And then they went about building the organization. They didn't do it the other way. They didn't bring somebody in and say, okay, here's how we want to do it. They made sure that culture that they wanted to have, the way they wanted people to be treated in this building and at Ford Field, was matched by Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, and that their personalities would fit that. And those guys have come in and lived it from the day that they've gotten here. And, you know, I think it starts with just being quality people. And if you have that, then you have players that want to follow along. If you have players that don't trust their coaches, don't believe in their coaches, feel like their coaches are telling them one thing and doing another, that's a license to lose and a license to not have things go your way. But it gives you an endurance and a durability when there's something deeper than just football. There's just something within this organization where everybody feels valued and you feel a part of success or failure. And I can't go any further than Sheila in crediting her in doing that. And I think she set the course for this organization, set the tone for this organization, put people in place that were going to continue that. And it's unlike anything I've seen in a lot of places. I mean, I covered Washington under Joe Gibbs. I saw it there. It started with him, and certainly it permeated that organization. And I'm seeing that here. And I think that's a part of everything that's happened. It's bigger than football, man. It's how you treat people and how those people feel valued every day when they come to work.
Yeah, that's really well said. And you're basically saying it's leadership, and it really starts at the top. Real quick, because I know you got to go. I hear so many people talk to me every day about, oh, man, the Lions got to be at home. They got to be at home. I said, that's fair. Okay, you want the home playoff game, and they're going to get that. But they've lost 2 games at home, 2 games on the road. I think the biggest compliment this team has right now is, besides the fact that it embodies this city as much as any team that we've had here in a long time, but that you trust them on the road as much as you do at home. What makes you think they can do that in the postseason on the road like they've done so far during the regular season?
I think, Shep, it's just what you said. It's the fact that they have gone and won 6 times on the road and 6-2 on the road. I think they're 6-2 now. 6-2 on the road this year, and they've proven it. Now, look, I do think that this team is better in a controlled environment because of the way that they play offense and the way that they want Jared Goff to work with timing and things like that. So, I mean, once they got past the Chicago game at Soldier Field, the rest of their games were basically indoors.
Right.
And I do think they're better. But look, if they have to go on the road to play this year, I don't think you look at that and say, oh, my goodness, there's a massive difference between the Lions at home and the Lions on the road. Like you might say with the Cowboys, who have been lights out, averaging almost 40 points a game at home, and then looking really vulnerable on the road. I don't know that you say that about the Lions. I think there's a comfort level that they have. I think these guys bond well together. I think there's that, we only got the guy standing next to us type attitude. And I think Dan Campbell is, the one thing he does, man, he sets the tone for this team and gets them ready to play. And I think he never makes it too big. He makes them understand where they're at. And I think he always has them ready to play when they're away from home. So, look, they've, obviously the Baltimore trip was miserable, but for the most part, this has been a really competitive team, whether they've been home or on the road. Would I rather be home? Yes. Would I rather be indoors? Yes. But if they have to go to Philadelphia, do I feel like this team is going to be really, completely up against it because of where they're playing? I'd say no. They'll figure out a way to deal with it.
Agreed.
Dan, before we let you go, of course, Game Day Live, I was fortunate enough to be a part of that show for 8 years. Let people know when they can see that this weekend, what you guys have coming up on Fox 2 as well.
we are doing the quick turnaround, which you guys have done. You guys have been early risers many times. So we're going to go to Dallas. We're going to get back home probably at 4 o'clock in the morning, and then we'll be on live at 10 a.m. on Fox 2 Sunday morning. So it's more of a wrap-up show this week than a pregame show. So we're looking forward to it. I mean, it's obviously been fun, guys. Look, there's nothing that beats winning. There's nothing that beats the vibe you get when there's good things happening and everybody around is feeling good. So hopefully we wake up Sunday morning and we're doing a post-victory show. But either way, we will be there on Fox 2 Sunday morning at 10 a.m.
Great stuff. Appreciate you, Dan. Always a pleasure. Safe trip to Dallas. Certainly bring home a W, and we'll all be watching Sunday morning. Always great catching up with you.
Keep up the great work, man. Way to go, buddy.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you guys. Great seeing both of you.
All right, we'll talk some junior hockey later on. I'll text you, okay?
He'll jump all over that.